right, and we are live. Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, April 7th, 2020, and I want to welcome everyone back to our Facebook page. My name is Michael Quedal, Digital Marketing Specialist for the New Jersey School Boards Association. And once again, we're coming at you live through the power of Cisco WebEx, trying our best to flatten the curve and practice social distancing. NJSBA has been hosting Facebook Live events to address questions from boards, school administrators, and educators through the COVID-19 pandemic. If you want to view a replay of a previous broadcast, click the videos tab on the left-hand side of the NJSBA Facebook page, and that's where you will see all of the previous broadcasts. And click that like button to make sure you are notified when we do go live in the future. We will be monitoring the comment section during and after the broadcast of today's session. So whether you are a school board member, administrator, teacher, or even a parent, we are here to serve you and help you work through this difficult time. And finally, I just wanted to say, once again, I hope everyone is okay and healthy and their families are okay as well. This week's Facebook Live events on our schedule include some of the following. Tomorrow, April 8th at 10 a.m., we're going to welcome John Henry back to the program, and he's going to give the iSTEAM and sustainability update with guests from some of the iSTEAM education community. And we're going to be focusing on the arts in STEM and STEAM tomorrow. And then on Friday, April 10th, Alicia DiLorenzo will be back once again in her reoccurring Facebook Live time slot every Friday, 10 a.m. And this week's session will address collective experience of grief, trauma, and loss, and the factors that contribute to resilience. And then together, we will all virtually practice techniques to support our own healing. But today, in this interactive session, we are joined by Mike Vrancik, NJSBA's Director of Governmental Relations at NJSBA, and we're going to be discussing advocacy in the age of COVID-19, and he will provide an update from Trenton. So without further ado, I proudly welcome Mike Vrancik to the program. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mike. How are you?
Doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Good.
So let's just dive right into it. A big question out there is regarding a bill A3902 and the delay of the state budget. And what does that mean for local districts, and what are you hearing right now?
Well, the bill as originally drafted was anticipating that there would be some local municipal governing bodies that were having problems with their tax collections. And in light of that, the legislation proposed granting the director of local government at the Department of Community Affairs some authority to allow municipal governing bodies to defer payments of their tax collections to school districts. Obviously, that was not a good idea. The bill was crafted, as I understand, in response to a request from the governor's office to provide some additional power in emergent situations. I don't think the intention was to make this a universal change in the way municipal tax collections and disbursements were handled, but rather to address emergent situations. That said, we worked together in concert with other education associations, and we prepared a series of recommended amendments, which we forwarded to the Senate. And our understanding is that there will be a Senate version introduced that includes amendments that guarantee that regardless of what happens at the municipal level, school districts will be held harmless and will continue to receive their flow of funds. So we're confident that if the bill passes at all, and it hasn't gotten through the second house or to the governor yet, that there will be changes to the bill that will make it work for school districts.
Great. I also want to reiterate, just for the people watching live and recording, we are going to be monitoring the comment section. So if you have any questions, just drop a comment below and click that like button, and I'll forward it along to Mike. Okay, so in the age of social distancing and trying to flatten the curve, what about the election this coming November? Is there any talk about changing that date?
Not right now. I know that yesterday there was some discussion, and the governor issued an executive order, or will be issuing one, that changes the election for those boards who still have elections in the spring from April to May 12th. But other than that, there's been no real conversation about anything having to do with November.
Okay. So another important date, not only November, but is May 15th, and that's a pretty important date in regarding to the school election calendar. Can you tell me a little bit why that date is important and what that date means?
Well, there's been a lot of conversation just recently about this because um, typically that's the date when districts are required to provide notices to employees if their contracts won't be renewed. That said, generally speaking, at this point, we have a fair amount of closure on what school aid would be. In the last couple of years, as a result legislative intervention, there have been some changes in the final school aid numbers. This year, we were hoping that school aid would be the numbers that the governor provided in his February budget proposal. Um, Although we've received nothing to indicate any changes, we know that there's going to be legislation introduced that extends the state's fiscal year until the beginning of actually the end of September. So fiscal year 21, instead of starting on the 1st of July, will start at the end of September. So will they revisit school aid and other parts of the state budget? It's very possible. So what does that mean for May 15th? Uncertain. It occurs to me that if the state decides well after May 15th that they're going to change school aid numbers in a way that creates a problem for districts, there's going to have to be with respect to provisions of existing labor relations law that will allow the proper notices, et cetera. We're hopeful that the school aid numbers that the governor provided in his budget in February will remain the numbers. That's the easiest possible scenario. But this is let's say this: we're in uncharted territory here. We've never seen anything like this, and the state has taken some extraordinary steps. In fact, to my knowledge, New Jersey's the only state that's actually physically had a conversation and addressed changing the timing of their fiscal cycle in order to address potential changes in revenues, et cetera. Um, there's some money that the state will be getting from Washington. Um, how much and what that will do to offset any potential lost revenues that the state would have are all questions that haven't been answered yet. Hence the desire to push back the budget by 3 months so that there's an opportunity for the legislature and the executive branch to figure out what makes the most sense. But right now, there's been no change to the school budget calendar. There's been no formal notification that aid numbers are going to be different. So the May 15th date remains the date for notification for those employees who may not be renewed. Hopefully, there won't be very many of those.
Yeah. So what is the Governmental Relations Department doing right now for boards of education? And how are they supporting boards of ed through this difficult time?
Well, that's a really good question, and I'm pretty fortunate in that I've got a great staff. Both John Pushman and Chris Jones previously worked. John worked for the Office of Legislative Services, and Chris worked in the Assembly Majority Office, and they have a lot of great contacts. They know a lot of legislators personally. John Burns has got a great rapport with the special education community, people at the department, and a lot of practitioners. Sharon Seiler has been in touch with people in Washington, following up on some of the things I just mentioned and what's happening in Washington that impacts New Jersey. So all of us, despite the fact that we haven't been in the office, have been on the phone with people and reaching out to people that we deal with on a regular basis to kind of keep track of what's going on and to make sure that the interests of local boards are being represented. So I think if anything, we've redoubled our efforts to make sure that our voice is being heard. And as things get introduced and discussions occur, we're making sure that our ideas are part of the process. So I think we've been doing a lot. If if there are board members who have concerns or questions, they should just email us and reach out, and we'll do our best to get their questions answered or provide the information that they need to move forward, because that's what we're about. And I think that in this extraordinary situation we find ourselves in, even though we're all working remotely, we still had a lot of great contacts with people in the state house, on the executive side, and Department of Education. So we're doing our best to make sure that NJSBA's voice is being heard.
Absolutely. You said, just reach out to you via email. What else can boards do to utilize the governmental relations department?
Well, I think we've been putting together information that's on our website. We're still following through with our school board notes, reviews of legislative initiatives, et cetera. So I think it's timely for boards to access all the tools that the association provides, because our footprint's sort of part of that. Um, to the extent that there's breaking news, we've been on top of it and providing information, and we'll continue to do so. Um, check our website regularly, and look at school board notes. And if you have questions or have concerns, reach out, and we'll do our best to get you the answers you need.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. To kind of wrap up this, what do you think boards should know right now that you think is important?
Well, I think that we're in a very fluid environment. The legislature and the governor have been trying to work together to do what's best for the state. Um, like I said, there's a lot that's just not known. Um, the legislature, for their part, has been practicing social distancing. So there hasn't been any formal sessions, so to speak, in Trenton. Everything is being done virtually. Our comments and our concerns are being addressed in that way. There haven't been any real committee hearings to speak of. And I think that for the most part, um, we've been following on the legislative calendars what is or isn't happening, because um, we we're just not sure what could go on next. The governor's been giving daily briefings, and that sort of gives an idea of what's on their minds and what's emerging as issues. But um, just yesterday, both houses have now scheduled quorum calls for Thursday, where they'll introduce bills. And I know that there will be legislation that will formalize the movement of the tax filing date from April 15th to July 15th. That's going to be done. There will be legislation that moves the date of the state budget from June 30th to September 30th. And the language in those bills will probably give us a lot of information, answer questions about whether or not they'll revisit school aid, et cetera. So we're following literally on a Trenton, and we've been in contact with the staff work behind the scenes in the majority and minority offices to find out what it is that we can provide by way of information. Um, there have been some legislators who have been having their own fact gathering information sessions virtually via meetings online. I think that to the extent that we can, we've participated to provide feedback on a lot of things. There's a lot of questions now about how well are we doing with the virtual learning environment that a lot of districts are in, et cetera. So um, we've been compiling information and sharing that with members of the legislature. And as we hear and get concerns addressed to us, we're passing them on to decision makers. So we're sort of information conduits at this point. And if board members have strong feelings in that regard, they should reach out to us.
Absolutely. We have a question coming from the chat, and I think it actually goes back to the first question I asked you. From Michael. He says, "I heard that the Senate will take up 3902 shortly, perhaps this week. Have you heard anything about that?" I think we already touched that, but do you want to just reiterate what you said earlier in the broadcast?
on the calendar, there's not the Senate doesn't have a voting session until next Monday. We haven't seen the board list yet. We probably will see that within the next 24 hours. We're optimistic that the amendments that we've recommended through the Senate Majority Office, 23902, that include the provisions that guarantee that there's no delay in the disbursement of funds to local districts, regardless of municipal tax collections, will be incorporated. And I'm encouraged that as recently as yesterday, I talked to some Senate staff who said that they were using our amendments. So, I mean, until we see the actual Senate bill, we don't know for sure. Pretty certain under the circumstances, there were a lot of people, not just at the association, but from other education organizations who sort of joined in and said, listen, things have to be done a certain way or else chaos breaks out. So I'm confident that if this legislation gets passed, and I think it will probably be considered, that our amendments will be addressed. And I need to reiterate that there is not an intention here to unilaterally change the tax collection process to penalize districts in any way. The legislation that's being put forward, it will require that the director of local government services in emergent situations can direct the change in a tax collection process. But we specifically asked for an amendment that says that in those instances where municipalities aren't collecting enough, that the government will direct those municipalities to borrow funds so that the cash flow to districts will remain in place. So if those amendments are incorporated into the bill, this legislation will be transparent to local boards of education.
Okay. We have another question from Bruce. Hey, Bruce. Um, he asked, Senator Sarlo has canceled the budget hearings till July. Is that true?
Yeah, because they've deferred the final budget until September 30th. So typically, the state has to pass into law on the last day of the fiscal year, which is typically June 30th, a budget for the fiscal year that begins the following day. They've delayed the process by 3 months in order to have an opportunity to see what revenues look like in this next quarter and to revise probably the revenue assumptions that they're going to build into the budget for next year. That said, until we know more, the tax collection final date from April 15th to July 15th, we're not going to have a real handle on what revenues are officially until July. So there's not much that they can talk about now except to speculate and hope that things work out. But Senator Sarlo has exercised his authority to suggest that, look, when we have these conversations in these hearings, we want to be able to talk with some substance. And right now that doesn't exist. So I also think that everybody's hoping that by July, there will be an opportunity to have some public input. Obviously, right now, we're still all home, and the legislature is not meeting formally in Trenton, so there are no committee hearings. And I think in that vein, this was kind of inevitable that they would just delay things until they're more ready to have a conversation about the underpinnings of any budget are the revenue assumptions, and they're just not sure what they are right now.
Okay, great. So again, I want to say if anyone has a comment or question, drop it in the comments below. I'll forward along to Mike. We have one from Al Miller. Hey Al, worst case scenario, districts can get cut up to September 30th now?
I think the worst case scenario will be that for the fiscal year that would have begun in July, districts get an amount that reflects the same amount they got in the current year. So it may be, I mean, the way the school funding formula works, state aid payments actually start in September. They're made 2 times a month for 10 months. And so to the extent that we defer the state's budget until September 30th, the question becomes, what about those September payments? And the word that I'm hearing is that at a bare minimum, they'll be based on the budget assumptions for the current year, which means that if you were scheduled to get an increase in aid, there might be a prorated reduction based on the difference between what you thought you were going to get in the next fiscal year and the number you got in the current year. But none of that is clear yet. And when we see this bill that postpones the budget, we expect to see some language that it will address that formally.
Okay. Rolling on with the questions, we have a question from Mark. And Mark, if new budget date is September 30th, what does that mean for contracts we have to offer? Teacher contracts, would dates change for that too?
That's a good question. Right now, I don't think so. But once again, this legislation that will change the calendar dates will have to consider all the implications for moving the state budget back 3 months. So so I would presume or hope that there will be something that addresses the impact on contracts. Do they automatically get extended for 3 months? Do we begin as if the contract year has started, notwithstanding the change in the state budget? Um, and that goes to the question of whether or not districts are going to get the money they thought they were going to get. That's still all up in the air.
Absolutely. I think a lot of things are just up in the air right now, and we're kind of at a seems like a holding pattern to see what happens next.
Right.
Because again, it's uncharted territory, and there's just a lot of questions out there. So I just want to thank you, Mike, for joining the broadcast today, and I wanted to thank everyone for watching live and watching the recording of this broadcast. We will be monitoring, like I said before, we will be monitoring the comment section after this broadcast ends. So if you have more questions, just drop them in the comment section below. Um, Facebook Live events will be announced through njsba.org, through School Board Notes, and through our Facebook page. So if you haven't already, click that like button. You're already here. Click that like button so you'll be notified the next time we go live. For the latest information, bookmark www.njsba.org/COVID-19, and I'll drop that in the comments below so everyone can bookmark that landing page because that landing page is updated daily. So again, thank you so much for joining the broadcast, Mike, and I hope you and your family stay well.
Thank you.